What is up, fantasy people? You are back with the True North Fantasy Podcast presented by Monkey Knife Fight. We are also, of course, part of the Fantasy Points Media Group, and with our promo code 21TrueNorth10, you can get 10% off at fantasypoints.com for all the elite analysis, resources, and tools to help you score more fantasy points. So I am Trav, coming live from beautiful Victoria, British Columbia. And of course, with me is the True North Research Demon, co-hosting and West Coasting, Tyrell McLaughlin. What's going on? Broseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat.
Same old. Yeah. I mean, it's only baseball on TV now, so we got some Jays action and lots of fantasy research with training camps underway.
Yeah, it is fun times right now, man. There are cleats hitting the field, and we love to see it. Without further ado, though, I want to bring in our very esteemed guest, Ty. He is a returning guest on the podcast. You've heard his podcast and read his articles as the driving force behind the PFF content machine. And obviously, he is one of the best fucking Twitter follows there are. You can find him there at... Yeah, no doubt. You can find him there at Hartitz, and that would be Ian Hartitz. Welcome back to the show, my man. How you doing?
Thanks, guys. Great day to be great. Great day to be back. Just been looking through some of these training camp videos. I love the account 32 Beat Writers. I think they do a great job just summarizing a lot of stuff. And, I was geeking out about this Justin Jefferson route, a couple minutes ago. I'll tell you what, Kirk Cousins had a throw off his back foot. 35 yards to Irv Smith. I'm not even big on Irv Smith because Tyler Conklin's going to be playing more than people think. But Kirk Cousins, people, if you haven't already, I've been screaming it for the last week. But look at the Vikings' first 7 games. Get Kirk Cousins before Trey Lance and stuff. But, yeah, good intro. I just got into Kirk Cousins there. But, yeah, guys, let's do it.
I love it. And let's do it with Minnesota running it back. I think, Clint is basically his dad. I think that offense will look basically identical. And there's a lot to look forward to there for sure, especially if Kirk Cousins is on point. And you mentioned that Twitter follow is that's a great account, but so is the 32 for 32 series that you got going on at pff.com. So everyone should be checking that out because I think it's incredible how easy you make all this look, Ian, like how good you are at Twitter and all that stuff. But I think what gets lost is that you're one of the hardest workers in the industry, like going back to 100 questions, 100 days. Player interviews with Mike Williams, Antonio Gibbs season. That was a real treat. So, I think it's pretty incredible. We were talking before that we're going to talk about some of the players that a lot of people are talking about, some of the offenses that are in vogue right now with some of the news. But I think we owe it to our listeners to definitely get Ian's take on a lot of this. What do you think, Trav?
100%, man. I mean, it's you said it really good. He makes it look easy. Like being as good as you are on Twitter is such a skill, Ian. And like Ty and myself, we're not like the most active on Twitter necessarily, but we're out there and it's incredible. You are like nonstop all day, and we definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Hey, I really think, man, podcasting, Twitter, all that, I feel like I get good at it from writing because, it just forces you to kind of rationalize your thoughts. You got to think through things more. And I don't know, I get my best ideas, my best tweets, and, just all that from writing. And, it's kind of like a good prep for podcasts. Because I realize like nowadays people are watching more videos and listening more than that. And it's not easy to sit there and write, 8,000 words about this or that. But I do think kind of just taking that extra step prepares you really well for all those other, content providers out there. So I know it's not easy, but when you kind of think about the just impact it makes elsewhere, I would say just writing every single day if you can is very helpful.
I like it.
That's a good tip for up and comers, and just really quick, Trav, before you hop in, like that's something I think Ian has really mastered is reaching out to all the entire spectrum of the fantasy football community, where it really is on a spectrum. I think you articulated that perfectly, and where you have diehards, you have all these different types of fantasy football fans, and it's basically hard to be a football fan these days and not be involved in fantasy in some capacity. So I think it's really marvelous just how you're able to reach all those different people on that spectrum.
Appreciate you, sir.
Totally, man. All right, guys. So we're keeping the listeners on their toes tonight, Ty, bobbing and or weaving, if you will, because I am gonna bring us in to the I'm gonna bring us into tonight's chat. Obviously, we're going to be talking news, notes, and training camp buzz, much like the Justin Jefferson hype that Ian was just laying out there, and that free Auden Tate that we can see there as well. We're hyped for training camp. You know, it's we finally got players hitting the field. Prime time for us to get excited. We don't give a shit if they're in their gym shorts and they're making catches against air. We just want to see it because we know that football is imminent. So I'm going to start off, Ian, by getting your thoughts on a couple quick ones here. These are ones that Ty and I have covered in recent kind of quick hitter videos, and I know that you've talked about them in your articles and on your podcast as well. But it's I wanted to hear it firsthand from you on the show. So we're going to start with Cam Akers. And just for anyone listening, no relation to former Eagles kicker David Akers, although I can see the resemblance. We were obviously very saddened by the Achilles tear, Ian. He was going as high as the back of the first round for some drafters. And it's, you know, that's a gut punch, especially, you know, there's people drafting days before that, minutes before that, probably.
There's but guys in really pumping his tires like Ian Hartitz.
Yeah, exactly. So, but what we have to do in fantasy football when this kind of stuff happens is we have to assess it and we have to find a way to move on, right? And so with that, I want to talk a little about Darrell Henderson. Ty and I are big fans of him, but I want to hear what you think we're going to see from Henderson in this Rams offense, and whether you think, you know, that I've seen him going in like around the fifth round. Do you think that's a worthwhile price for what he might produce this year?
Yeah, I'm honestly surprised he hasn't been going a little bit higher. That spent so many damn hours this summer barking about Cam Akers over Jonathan Taylor. Like, the reasoning behind it was always pretty simple. Like, you look at the running backs you're drafting, the top 12, top 15, and almost every single one of them is either, you know, for the top 5, like the featured single back in their backfield. But at worst, it's like, you know, an Alvin Kamara and Austin Eckler, like a very fantasy friendly or just an awesome player in a 2-back backfield. Jonathan Taylor, as I think people are finding out, as like we're getting even Marlon Mack training camp hype here, like it's a 3-back backfield, and it's not that Jonathan Taylor is not the lead back there, but to spend this top 6, top 7 pick on him like a lot of people are, he needs to be a complete world beater to pay off at that value. For someone like Cam Akers and now Darrell Henderson, they don't need to necessarily be a world beater because they're going to have so many extra touches by being the potential feature back. We have McCaffrey, Dalvin, Saquon, Zeke. Those are really Henry to an extent, but he doesn't get the targets. Todd Gurley used to be in that argument, and the hope was with Akers that he was going to be the new Todd Gurley, or even CJ Anderson, or whoever was McVay's RB1 until this last season when it was just muddled up. So Henderson, he's only played over 50% of the snaps in 2 of his career games. I'm not sure they view him the same way as Akers, but man, like, I don't know who they add at this point if they don't just, unless they really hate Henderson, which I don't think is the case. He was more than fine last year. I don't know who they add that he's not going to be anything other than the lead early down back in a top 10, top 12 ranked scoring offense. So for me, you know, going up into like the RB 15, top 12 range, I was hesitant to do that for sure. I have him ranked right now as my RB 19. But I mean, as I think we were talking pre-show, like I was just doing an underdog draft. This dude's going behind Gaskin, Mike Davis. Like, he's going in the late 20s already. So at that asking price, man, I'm absolutely in. Round 5, sign me up. If he starts creeping into like round 3 territory and you know, redraft, that's probably when I'll, you know, avoid the quote unquote RB dead zone and get a wide receiver. But where he's going now, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's definitely smash city. We definitely want to see him get the targets because we haven't necessarily seen the Rams running backs get a ton of targets the last couple seasons. But I do think that, much like yourself, that I think Darrell Henderson earned some trust from the coaching staff that he didn't previously have, obviously, with them drafting Cam Akers. But I think when they gave him a shot last year, he was effective and he was explosive. I actually looked it up today, and of the running backs who had at least 100 carries, I think he was top 10 with a 14% explosive rush rate. And that's on sharpfootballstats.com. And so like, I think just the explosiveness is going to be his avenue. Even if he's got somebody who's working alongside him, I think he's still going to probably give us that top 20 at least. So very nice assessment, my friend. Let's move on to the next quick one, and then Ty's going to take it away with some with a little bit more juice that haven't been covered quite as much. Yeah.
Really quick, Trav, just because we were mentioning it before the show, I think the one thing that's getting lost in the Akers conversation is just the passing game. Like the passing game is big winners here because the efficiency, the identity of the Rams offense, some of the wrinkles that we were expecting to be introduced with Stafford, that was a little bit up for debate compared to the Goff era. But what wasn't, we were less sure that the pass rate was going to change all that much. You know what I mean? We thought they would still be predicated on yards after the catch and running the ball a ton. But I think that running the ball a ton part is definitely something that we could be asking if that's true going forward here.
Absolutely. So what that means to me is just Cooper Kupp, 25 hours a day, 8 days a week, gentlemen. I am all about
Robert
it.
Woods, wide receiver one, yeah.
I like some Robert Woods too, but Cooper Kupp is my man.
Would you guys take, hold on real quick, Woods
yeah.
and Kupp versus Evans and Godwin? Yeah.
I'd probably lean... Yeah, because of Antonio Brown, I'd probably just lean towards Cooper Kupp, the known commodity, because are those guys going to score within, 1 or 2 points per game of one another? I really think they will. So I think I'll take the one that's cheapest would be the correct answer. But if I'm in that late 4th, 5th round at the turn there, I'm probably going to take Cooper Kupp because I'm more confident that he's going to give me a weekly floor. Should you be chasing that weekly floor with your wide receiver 3 or whatever? That's maybe a little bit up for debate. Yeah.
If we're building a real life team, we're taking Evans and Godwin, but in fantasy
100%.
land, probably the Rams, particularly after Akers.
Totally. Just that week to week consistency. And I think for Godwin is kind of the pivot point for me on that, just because Antonio Brown, I think, kind of can directly take some of what he does more so than Mike Evans, whereas Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods don't have that. Yes, that is a Christmas mug. Thank you, Kaylee.
July, right?
Thank you, Kaylee. Shout out to Kaylee. Actually, we just started an Instagram just this week, ladies and gentlemen. Find us on there at TruenorthFFB. And Kaylee is the homegirl that's going to be behind the account. So we're getting her set up, getting her ready to rip it over there. So thank you for that. Next guy I just want to quickly touch on here is Michael Thomas, Ian. There's been a lot of talk about what's going on. Tommy Lee Lewis, we saw, went there today. Obviously, Deontay Harris, and just like a whole slew of people who, we've had a little bit of excitement about before, but probably aren't the guys who are going to be the target hogs there. Michael Thomas went on the PUP, not the PUP that's automatically 6 weeks missed. Obviously, he still could come back earlier than those 6 weeks, but I want to say, like, let's say if we get around 10 weeks of Michael Thomas, Ian, are you still looking to draft him if he gets, say, back there into like the 8th round or behind, or do you think you would be just stepping off that and just in case it lingers?
Not really. Right now, I ranked him wide receiver 47, right behind Judy, Mike Williams, Brandon Cooks, ahead of like Aguilar, Beasley, and Hardman, some of those guys. So it might be around that range, but I'll tell you, I will say, and I kind of got this from Evan Silva, I still consider the GOAT of our industry. And, he made the good point where, like, when you're making these rankings and stuff, like, you're for sure going to set them, based on whatever the hell you're trying to do. But you need to go through like several drafts before you're like feeling really good about them, because you need to have money on the line and be like, hold on, who do I want now that I have 30 seconds to decide? Like, I know the information for both guys. Who do I actually want? And like doing like one of my first drafts today after kind of the whole Michael Thomas news broke, like, I don't really want this at all, guys. It doesn't sound good by any stretch of the imagination. And, this offense, it wasn't like it was trending up to begin with. I was higher on Thomas than most before. I had him as my wide receiver 6. I think his ADP was wide receiver 10, but I'm fine fading the injury prone narrative when the guy isn't already hurt. That's the problem here. Like when people say like, oh, Mixon, Carson, they're just going to get hurt. They're not going to stay healthy. I'll fade that idea. You know, people said that about Keenan Allen once upon a time until it wasn't true. But when the guy's already hurt, like this reeks of freaking, you know, AJ Green from 2 years ago. Like it's stuff like that. So the fact he's as hurt as he is, you know, I probably will be bumping him down another 10 or so. And the only reason I can really think about it, you know, later round, best ball for a tournament, maybe, or if in a redraft and people really start to just fade them. A lot of people have keepers for a year or so. So if you can scoop them up, like, yeah, so if you can scoop them up round 15, stash them away or something, then that's reasonable. But in terms of 2021, what we're expecting, I think it's probably just going to be no for me.
Yeah, I think that's well put there. I got him at the mid 40s as well myself, just because those spike weeks could happen and that team could be begging for somebody to eat up some targets whenever he does come back. But definitely something to keep an eye on. And I like that point about the best ball ones as well, because if you're getting him at a huge discount and then he comes back and he's getting 7 to 12 targets a game, I think that's going to be a huge boost to those best ball teams. But Ty, I know you'd be more in tune to where he's going in best balls now than I would.
Yeah, but like he is falling precipitously in best ball drafts, but that's the one format that I probably have zero interest in Michael Thomas. I still have interest in him in your typical league that has an IR spot or two, you know, just in case, because you're going to be drafting him as your wide receiver 7 or 8. And, you know, if I need that IR spot, I can drop him at some point. So I definitely go into a lot of drafts and operate at the back end of a draft under the assumption I'm going to drop a lot of these guys. So I still have some interest in Michael Thomas, but I understand where people are coming from. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to move into our next guy, because you talk about a bleak situation. Just about a month ago, Deshaun Watson was in quite the bleak situation. I think the Texans are still in a pretty bleak situation, but I want to start with just Deshaun, because I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that he even plays in Houston in 2021, if he plays it at all. With that being said, I think, you know, we all had to reassess when he reported to camp, and everything out of David Culley's mouth, the first time head coach in Houston, who hasn't lost a presser yet, Mike Tomlin style. But everything out of his mouth has been purely diplomatic. So we're kind of in the dark as to how the Texans feel in this situation, like what their expectations are. But if you're drafting today, Ian, how are you approaching Deshaun Watson, like who is obviously the Tom Cruise of fantasy football?
So when I was drafting today, I had Watson in my queue for round 18 to be my third quarterback. So I said, hey, maybe it could happen. In round 18, I'll take a chance. I didn't get him, so I took Taysom Hill instead. And I was thinking about taking Taysom ahead of Deshaun Watson. So that's basically my line of thinking with this guy. Not good. He's playing safety right now. Who is going to trade for him when this stuff is apparently hanging over their heads for next month? If there's one thing every single Houston Texans signing has told us this year, is that they don't want to win football games in the year 2021. So they are obviously, they're playing Watson at the freaking safety. They don't want him to get hurt. They're not trying to build an offense around him this year because of all the, you know, just law shit going on with it. And it's terrible if even half of this shit is true. So no, I mean, I'm at 18th round wild card, fine, but man, oh man, like, you know, we've seen this happen before where there's not a move being made and people are like, well, should we get behind it? Until it is, and then they just don't play the rest of the season. You know, the Adrian Peterson switch thing. Like, there's the commissioner list, like when Zeke got suspended for something that he didn't even end up getting charged for. Like, I think he might have gotten charged for. He was never found. Greg Hardy, there's countless examples of Roger Goodell going beyond what the law says anyway. So for people to be looking at the idea that like, oh, the case isn't until February, I get that. And maybe Deshaun is innocent. I have no freaking idea. All I'm trying to say is that Roger Goodell has time and time shown again to take these type of matters into his own hands. And when the Texans themselves are telling us that they don't expect him to be playing because they're lined to do it up as safety, I mean, I just can't get behind that.
And you know, you go back, he wasn't there. The one thing David Culley did say is he wasn't there. He admitted that he was not there during all offseason, which we knew, you know, he wasn't part of the OTAs and everything in Houston. So I think the one thing we can take away for fantasy is that we shouldn't operate under the assumption just because Deshaun Watson is back in camp that he will be under center for the Houston Texans. And I think Ian articulated perfectly that we should probably anticipate a pretty hefty suspension, even if he was to play anywhere in 2021. The guy who's definitely playing in 2021, it's final. We know now it's Aaron Rodgers. You know, the new deal is in place. It's a fun little deal. He got some you got a gift bag on the way out, whatever. It's a weird little deal that these two parties came to. But what are you doing with Aaron Rodgers in fantasy? Like, if we think of it in terms of tiers of quarterbacks here, Ian, is he shooting all the way up to like the Kyler, Dak, Lamar tier? Is he going to that next one with Justin and Justin Herbert and Russell Wilson? Or does he settle further back with the Staffords, Brady's, and beyond?
I've been riding that second one. I had him with the Stafford and Brady's with the uncertainty in the air. I'm now moving up to QB7 behind Russ and then the top 5. Dak, Kyler, Josh, Lamar, Patrick tier. Yeah, so I like it. I will say, in drafts, Dak's usually, and Russ sometimes, that's kind of where I start drawing my line. We talk about the RB dead zone. I think we kind of get in the QB dead zone to some extent, where I'm more content if I don't get a top 5 guy to go take like Trey Lance and Kirk Cousins later versus using, a 7th, 8th round pick on, Herbert or Jalen Hurts or something like that. So I was happy to get the discount on some best ball drafts for the past couple months where all these Packers were going cheap. And because of this, Davante Adams back to wide receiver 1, Aaron Jones is my RB6, I believe, or RB7. I'm still a believer in Saquon. I've heard arguments for him RB5 or RB4. I could see that as well. I think he's right there in that second tier running back. So it's great things. The problem is, like, hand up. I told people to fade Aaron Rodgers last year, not because I didn't think he still wasn't a great real life quarterback, but he was a QB 14 in fantasy points per game 2 years ago.
Trending down.
Yeah, they didn't change anything on the roster. The best bet people had was like, hey, they drafted Jordan Love. Rodgers is going to be pissed off and play better. And like, that's kind of hard to go out and really, put your job on the line for that kind of shit. So it was a situation where like, yeah, I was absolutely wrong. And second year in the system, stuff like that definitely plays a role in it. But coming back to this year, like every example we've seen of a quarterback having a touchdown rate as high as his, and it was 9.1% last year. And I don't want to sit here. Yeah, I don't want to keep yelling regression. I hate when we overuse that word for sure. But the main thing when people say regression is just like, you can't be that unfreaking human for 2 years in a row because it's so hard to be that damn good in the National Football League. So that's more of what we're saying with Rodgers. It's kind of the same thing with Josh Allen. It was why we faded Lamar Jackson to a small extent last year. Rodgers QB7 for me, but I just not as great. All right, world beater last year, league's best quarterback, won the MVP. He was the QB4 because he doesn't run, because fantasy football doesn't reflect real life football as well as it should. So I mean, if that was how good it worked last year, and if we expect us even a small step back, it's just going to be more of a low-end QB1. So, Robert Tonyan, Adams, Jones, I think we can get much more behind these guys now. But just in terms of expecting Rodgers, to really beat out the guys that are putting up similar passing numbers with the rushing, I mean, just the rules of our game are working against them there.
No, I think you laid that out perfectly. Like with the Packers, the reason we love Aaron Jones and have more confidence in his ability to repeat some of the stuff that he's done in fantasy is because of how the offense looks, I would say. Because what Rodgers did is very unrepeatable just because of how unbelievably perfect everything went for Green Bay last year, including play volume, everything. And then the touchdowns, it's just, it's incredible. And then you factor in the fact that he is 38 years old and he doesn't add with his legs, and that does cap him in fantasy. And you realize you might be drafting him fairly close to his ceiling. The only other guy I wanted to grab your thoughts on in this Packers offense, because you really laid out a lot of it perfectly there, was Randall Cobb, because he's in the news. And it kind of threw me for a tizzy. So do you think this was just them appeasing Aaron Rodgers? Do you think LaFleur and him and Rodgers will make sure Cobb is on the field for, say, 60% of the snaps? And what do you think that would do for somebody like Aaron Jones or Robert Tonyan's market share?
To me, it doesn't change much. I put him ahead of like Amari Rodgers and Allen Lazard, but those are our slot receivers in the offense. We're going to have Davante Adams as the alpha target hog number 1 that he freaking is. We're going to have MVS running clear out routes that, are more valuable than a lot of people give him credit for. I know he drops some, but he also catches a lot, Like the same thing with Will Fuller, same thing with Nelson Aguilar. Like when you get open as much as these guys, I know the drops are annoying, but you got to give them a little bit credit for getting open when a lesser player wouldn't get those targets to begin with. So for Cobb, He's not been bad the last 2 years. I went to Cowboys 2 years ago. He almost averaged like 10 yards per target. He was pretty good. Last year, he was just banged up. I'm just worried about him actually getting the featured role in this passing game because nobody could get it last year. And as much as Rodgers apparently loves Randall Cobb, I'm just not certain that, they use a third-round pick on Amari. Allen Lazard is one of those guys where he's like a Willie Snead, DeMarcus Robinson type. Like, just a really much better real-life player in terms of blocking and just knowing the offense. And we probably give him credit for. Like, he's going to soak up some snaps. And now at that point, like, we're hoping Cobb's maybe a 50-60% snap guy, getting 5-6, lower ADOT targets per game. So I'll probably be fading Cobb unless he's like a later round pick. I'm thinking like, wide receiver, late 60s, early 70 range, and I'm not exactly sure what the consensus is around him yet, but I'm not exactly expecting the comeback season for him. I think I'm down to buy Davante Rodgers last dance, but getting Randall Cobb in here, it's like, come on, like it is 2021.
Where's Donald
so you
Driver
say
at?
Yeah, no good. No. Ian, you say their last dance, so you don't think that Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers make like an NBA pair and go take their show on the road in 2022 somewhere?
Boy, that'd be awesome if they went together somewhere. I didn't even think about that until right now. Just see it, Derek. Wow, what a plot twist. Derek Carr recruits Davante Adams, and they just bring Rodgers with them. And
Aaron Rodgers just drops the hammer. Yeah.
Well, no. I mean, it certainly sounds like, I was saying, pat myself on the back. I was always saying Rodgers would be back in Green Bay. Also said Julio would be back in Atlanta, but who's counting? But just with the whole thing, I was like, he's under contract. They're not going to trade the guy. It sounds like at a minimum, though, the thing that's concerning is that it sounds like they voided 2023, but the 2022 thing, like Rodgers says that it's his impression that he can like go elsewhere, but it sounds like that wasn't exactly written down in the contract language. So I wonder if we're going to have this whole damn thing going around again next offseason. So we'll see. 2022 is a toss-up. 2023 and beyond, I mean, at this point, it seems pretty damn iffy. I didn't think Brady would ever leave New England. If you can't figure it out by now, my first instinct with any of these things is like, no, he's not going to leave. And, we'll be surprised when we're surprised. But, yeah, at least 2021, that's what we're worrying about right now.
Oh, right on. And, yeah, if you bought the Green Bay Packers all offseason, which most of us have been, it's really paid off. Shout out to @the FF Aviators in the chat. Definitely made that good call on our risers and fallers episode, going outside the box in my question at the end of that episode. That was a great call by him. I also know he's a big fan of the Bengals passing game and a big fan of yours as well, Ian. But Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, kind of an unlikely guy that we didn't know we would see so much of so far, but I was creeping some good throws of his earlier today on the move even. So I don't want to ask just if we think we see Burrow in live action, because for our fantasy drafts, thinking of all these weapons that we want to be attached to, the proposition of several guys from the Bengals shooting up draft boards through the preseason, I think that's totally possible. So, Ian, do you think we get a glimpse of this full first unit in preseason? And does that mean we're getting some discounts possibly on these Bengals weapons?
I will say they might get a couple reps. It's not going to be anything more than a series or so. And it just doesn't really matter as much with it. I mean, Burrow's going to be fine, I think, as long as the volume's there. And he was number one in the damn league in dropbacks before that injury. I would just say, like, the disrespect to Tyler Boyd is unreal. And as someone that really missed, like, the entire Jarvis Landry window of him just being routinely 10 to 15 spots undervalued, great. Let's make up for it with, Gen Z Jarvis Landry. I know he's not that young, but Tyler Boyd is now the guy that is just 16, 17 spots priced below where he freaking should be. And the fact that people continue to underestimate slot receivers in Fantasyland, particularly full point per reception, is just getting ridiculous. This dude was the wide receiver 11 before Burrow got hurt last year. And they brought in Jamar Chase to replace AJ Green. You think AJ Green was helping out there? Like, we still have a guy projected for triple-digit targets and an offense we expect to ascend. And guess what? I have Boyd ranked as my third Bengals receiver, behind Chase, behind Higgins. But I have him ranked as my wide receiver 24 because this offense could be putting up numbers. He's going outside the top 36 receivers anywhere you look. Like, that's what's wild to me. So I really haven't been getting too much Chase and Higgins. I haven't been, reaching as much as other people have. But Boyd, for me, has just been an easy buy because time and time again over the past 3 years. In far worse situations than this one, we've seen him supply at worst wide receiver 2 to upside wide receiver 3 value, and at best, legit wide receiver 1 value. And, I think, Tyrell, you were saying before, like looking at buying a player out their floor versus their ceiling, Boyd's the only major contributor in this offense we can get closer to his floor than his ceiling. So, yeah, let's freaking do it.
That is a really good point. Yeah. And, they took Jamar Chase. Yeah. But they passed on Penei Sewell to do that. And what was their biggest issue last year? That offensive line. And what did they do? Throw up prayer yards, that inaccuracy. It wasn't just AJ Green. It was definitely Joe Burrow. And do they want to keep just throwing up the air yards, making them prayer yards, as Ian calls it? I think they might be better served dumping it off to Tyler Boyd if the pass protection breaks down here and there. Trav, is there anybody outside of Tyler Boyd, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins that you're really targeting from the Bengals?
I
can't give it to Ian because obviously he's biased, as you can see with the tag.
Yeah. Well, I do like Auden Tate, but I have been known to dip my toes in a little bit of Joe Mixon from time to time. If you can get him mid-second and you just hit that right spot in the tier of running backs where he's the next guy up, I think that's where I would probably pounce on him, like probably behind like your Austin Eckler area. If he sneaks into the early second round, I'd be looking at Joe Mixon too, because I think this team is going to pass a lot. And like what you just said, Ty, I think some of those short passing situations could end up going to Joe Mixon with no Gio Bernard in there anymore. So I think he presents a little bit of upside, but he kind of fluctuates, because when he starts getting into the back of that first round, I do like some other options more than I do like Joe Mixon there. So if I can get him mid-second at a bit of a deal on running back 1 on a high-powered offense, I'll take it.
Nice. So nobody's worried about the Bengals. We should probably be buying that entire passing game, that's for sure. Some people are a little bit worried about Dak Prescott, the other quarterback coming off a serious injury that was ready to go to the start of camp. Unfortunately, he left practice the other day, soreness in the arm, blah, blah, blah. I think he only misses a week or so. But do you think are you concerned at all, Ian? And do you think this will maybe cause the average draft positions to be suppressed a little bit in Dallas? Or is that just a pipe dream?
No, and he's not changing as the QB5, but I think he is already starting to fall down. I got him earlier, a little bit later than I thought he'd be there. Like, it's July, people. They're not going to force these guys back. And yeah, I wish Dak didn't have a right shoulder injury. It's not ideal that he's limited at all. I understand that. But the fact that he's so far ahead of schedule and ready, with his horrific ankle injury that we just saw, that's the best thing. Like, we've seen quarterbacks years and years, throughout this going on, limited, just on a pitch count at practice and this and that. And we want to pay attention to it, sure. But when we're getting day-to-day calls already, and he's still out there, it's not like they're sitting him down or anything like that. It's, I'm not gonna pretend like I know the full extent of his injury, but until we see like someone legit say like his week 1 status is in jeopardy, I'm just not gonna worry about it. And the same thing with Amari Cooper. He's on the PUP list, but Jerry Jones, who I know at times has been known to give some pretty awful updates, like Amari Cooper at this point is starting to go as like a mid-low end wide receiver 2. And I think if we're betting men, is he going to be out there week 1 or not? I don't know. I'm for sure taking yes. Like, it's me. This is an ankle injury that, yeah, unfortunately he dealt with last year, but he played through it all last year as well. So, again, not ideal, but something that we're not, completely unfamiliar with. And, again, when it's just July and, like, look at the storylines that are coming out over the past 2 or 3 days. Like, we are so crazed for football that even the smallest ailment is just popping off as the biggest thing. We got people saying Jaylen Waddle's injured again, even though, like, the article was basically stating that, like, yeah, he stayed down on the ground for a couple extra seconds after going for, a pass and then got up. And, like, they continue to say he, like, walks with a limp, but everyone else is saying that he walks, like, with swag, and that's just his thing. Like, you just need to be so careful during training camp that you don't fall into some of these traps. And just looking at the Cowboys, already notorious for getting more news than any other really team out there with Dak and Cooper. Once we hear they're completely, no timetable for return, okay, maybe I'll be a little more concerned. But for now, I'm not adjusting the ranks.
Yeah, when he's back in a week or 2, I think people are going to feel silly on the Dak one. Maybe even the Amari one too, because we mentioned that a couple shows back, Trav, that we actually got lucky where he had just passed CeeDee Lamb had just surpassed Amari Cooper in FFPC draft. best ball drafts. I'm wondering, though, because we had a question from Mr. Kennedy earlier. I believe it was Mr. Kennedy in the chat who said, is CeeDee Lamb the wide receiver 1 overall in Dynasty? I think we would all agree that we're taking CeeDee Lamb probably over Amari Cooper in Dynasty, but how high do you think is too high for CeeDee Lamb in a Dynasty start?
I'd probably go 3 for him: Jefferson, AJB, and CeeDee. 2021, I still have Cooper 1 spot ahead. CeeDee, I mean, no, he's for sure top 5, top 3, I'd say.
Yeah,
what about you, Trav?
I got 2 spots between him for 2021, but I do have him. I just got him coming up here. I'm pretty sure I have him in that top 5 there, right around the 4 range, because I love me some CeeDee in this offense for sure.
Who else is in there? Diggs, probably.
Yeah, I got Diggs, AJ Brown,
I definitely have Diggs in that range.
Justin Jefferson.
Like I was saying,
just thinking of Diggs.
First thought is 3, but I think 4 behind Diggs probably sounds a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Totally, and that's what I wanted the range. Like top 5 is fair. I think maybe wide receiver 1 overall is definitely a matter of preference, to say the least. And the other thing I wanted to say with Dak, you mentioned Diggs. It made me laugh. Like the way I always think of these things is think of it if it was Trayvon Diggs. If he was the one who was left practice early with the shoulder soreness, like how would you deal with that if he was coming off an ankle injury? You probably wouldn't give a shit. So I don't think it's a big deal with Dak Prescott.
I want to see how he looks mobility wise and whether he's going to be getting outside of the pocket on that ankle, because that was a nasty one. Conor McGregor just had a similar one in that last fight that he had. Those are just nasty, man.
That McGregor one too, man. I feel like this. And look, I as a it's awfully hard to defend McGregor with anything he's doing nowadays. Man. It's just getting awful. But I saw that admittedly, I just really liked him. Particularly earlier in his career.
Ditto.
It is a little bit crazy how in this fight where Dustin was landing some nice ground to pound, but if you actually look at the stats, Conor landed more strikes and they just missed on a cross, and his ankle collapsed. And then, who was probably going to win after Dustin? I get it. Conor's a 1-round fighter and all that, but it's, every other time we've seen a fighter have this like bad of an injury, it's way more considered like, that's unfortunate. And maybe he deserves it. So I'm not even really disagreeing with it. I'm just saying like the phenomenon of it as a whole has like just been wild to watch. And like, it's still in the news like weeks after it. So I love UFC, guys. I'll jump on that any day. Second best sport, second favorite league in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've been since the pandemic, I've gotten right into it, and
let's go.
It's incredible. So
have you been to a fight?
No, I haven't.
I'm kind of the opposite. Guess what fight I went to, and I got very lucky. So I went to Wanderlei Silva, Chuck Liddell. So that was Matt Hughes, GSP2. And I'm talking like, if you look up that card, it will blow your mind. It went down as like the greatest card ever for a while.
Bro, I see some of these old cards and they're like 8 fights deep. It's absolutely insane. But I was going to say, to me, like, MMA fights and maybe boxing too. I just haven't been there. Combat sport fights and hockey, to me, like when you're there live, are just so much better, and they're awesome on TV too. But when you're there live, like, oh man, like 2019, I went to like 5 or 6 fights alone. Like I just could not get enough of it. So haven't been yet since the pandemic, but looking forward to more.
Yeah, shout out to Frank Mir and Dave in the chat. Frank Mir was definitely one of my favorites too. Yeah.
Let's go. Let's go.
We'll have to re-up this and get into some MMA chat, Ian, because I would love that. I actually just watched the Usman Covington fight today because the second fight of that's coming in November.
Colby was up 3-1 going into round 5, man. I know people hate the guy.
No, yeah,
he got knocked out, so it didn't matter. I mean,
volume wise, I think potentially for sure. So. I'm going to come back in here on some more pup news because it's freaking pup season right now, I guess, boys? This one's Curtis Samuel in Washington. We are very excited for his insertion into that offense. He brings another electric dynamic to it, much like Terry McLaurin, much like the homie Dyami Brown, but I want to hear if you're concerned about Curtis Samuel at all with that, because he does have some injury history. And wherever you sit on that, how do you think he's going to perform this year when he gets in there with Fitzmagic?
It's kind of like Cooper, man. It's not ideal. It's also not something at this point that I've felt the need to like really go in and drop him a bunch for. I'm still waiting to get more information until today, because I heard yesterday he was on the PUP list and I was searching for it. And then today I saw it was finally a groin injury. So like if we can't even name the injury at first, I don't know. I would hope it's not that bad. But yeah, again, it's not ideal. We don't want them to be injured. But I mean, come on, they're paying him far too much money to not be anything other than a starting receiver. If he's healthy, Curtis, other than his rookie year, really hasn't had any injury problems. But Dyami Brown's interesting because, unfortunately, hearing some of the Humphreys chatter, I'm not sure if Dyami's going to be out there. I'm saying it wrong. How you say his name?
I just say Dyami Brown. Yeah,
I'm saying
deal.
Dyami. Okay,
yep.
Cool.
Yep.
Welcome.
Anyway.
Dyami.
Ideal world, I thought, would have been Curtis in the slot, Terry on one side, and Dyami on the other. If Humphrey's in the slot and Curtis and Terry on the outside, that's going to be a little more problematic. I will say, though, man, like one of my favorite metrics I've come up with on my own is this thing called playmaker rate, where I basically take like 15-plus yard runs, catches of 20 yards, touchdowns, and broken tackles. I give them like 1 point for broken tackles, other points for the other shit. Cool stuff that playmakers do. And I apply it to the college football wide receivers coming out. Number one, flashing out Bucs champ from draft eligible wide receivers. Number one was Jalen Darden. And then we had Davante Smith. Yeah, sure. Then Dyami Brown, and then Marlon Williams and Cornell Powell, who I've also kind of liked in some spurts. So I understand. I'm not saying this shouldn't replace your overall rankings or anything like that, but that's when he popped out to me. And to me, Dyami and Josh Palmer are in similar situations where they're third-round wide receivers that did good things in college that we should like from an explosive standpoint. They're in passing games that we should like. There's just some uncertainty with whether or not they can get that number 3 wide receiver spot. I think Palmer probably has a better chance. I've been taking him ahead of Dyami so far, but with that said, man, it's possible, and at least in Dynasty Land, I think they're great mid-round picks to go after because there's a lot to like with them and their offense. And we might only be a year or two away from them all of a sudden shooting up that depth chart.
Yeah, for sure. I like the talent of Dyami Brown better than I like Palmer, I would say, but the situation for Palmer is no doubt better that they both take the top off the defenses. They do it in different ways too, but I was really excited for Dyami. I wasn't so stoked on that landing spot, but I think if they do move Curtis Samuel around, that is good for him. But I think year one, we might just have to wait. I actually kind of do like Adam Humphries as a slot receiver. Like I think he's a pretty good player when he gets to work. So it's going to be interesting to see how that shakes out because I think Curtis Samuel is better served at moving around as opposed to being like pegged as an outside receiver. But Ron Rivera's had him before and he knows how to kind of get him out in space and use him in the gadgetry as well as being a wide receiver. And I think Fitzmagic is a dynamite quarterback for him to do that with. So I think you can get Curtis Samuel as a wide receiver 3 that's going to give you wide receiver 1 weeks from time to time. So no concern for me either here, Ian. And I think he's going to come back looking good as the second in the pecking order to Terry Mack, of course. Yes, Jordan Palmer is Canadian. We love it.
It was funny.
I think Justin Boone rubbed off on you there, Ian.
I love Justin. So I was gonna say real quick, PFF Fantasy Pod, we had Antonio Gibson on a couple weeks ago, and I've kind of learned, just talking to some other guys, okay, it's tough to really ask them workload or usage questions because they just say, I'll do whatever coach tells me to do, which, yeah, great. I don't blame them at all for saying that. That's true. They should do that, but that's what we want to know, obviously. But with Gibson, the one I tried to sneak in, I was like, asked about Fitzpatrick, and I was like, any good stories? He's like, oh, he's a great guy. Like, we all love him and stuff. And I was like, so it's safe to say, he's being treated as like the QB1 in the locker room. And he was like, well, coach is saying it's a competition and we're going to keep going with that. I was like, damn, I thought I might get it for a second, but they're still doing that shtick in Washington. But I will say, guys, I think I haven't had to go to Fitzpatrick as much as I thought I would in drafts because I've found, the Kirk Cousins cheat code in the first 7 weeks. So I can get Cousins or even Baker Mayfield later, which I'm taking over Fitz for sure. But if you're super flex or something and going longer, like Ryan Fitzpatrick, he finally doesn't have this high-end first-round quarterback for his team to, rightfully replace him with. Even though he was out playing Tua last year, I get why they wanted to see what they had in Tua. Now, okay, is this Fitzpatrick versus Heineke with the only, goal being to win football games, yeah, give me Fitzpatrick. Absolutely. So where he's going, the mid QB 20 range. Absolutely.
No, big time. He's and he's just better for the NFL. It's more fun to watch football when Ryan Fitzpatrick is playing, you know. Ty, what do you think about that Washington offense before we move into the next one?
Well, I think we might get stripped a little bit of seeing where Curtis Samuel's market share comes from. That was a question I had. Like, I would have loved to see him just for that one series. You know, does he get one snap in the backfield? Is he in the slot? Is he in motion a lot? You know, and we talk about training camp hype. There was definitely a big bomb from Kyle Allen to Dyami Brown. And I saw somebody asking in the chat or saying that a lot of people loved Dyami Brown. During the draft process, Trav, you were definitely one of them. People I trust immensely, like Dane Brugler was one of them. So there were some Dyami Brown fans, and you could say he did slide in the draft if you wanted to.
Yeah, man, 2,000 yards and 20 touchdowns in the last 2 seasons on a team where Javonte Williams and Michael Carter were feasting. So,
what amazed me with Ian's metric there is that if he's scoring that high, I wouldn't imagine he was seeing the same volume of screen passes that Devontae Smith, who led the college football last year, you know, in screen passes and yards off screen passes. So I think he was doing some of these, some of the elusiveness was much more, less manufactured, I guess I would say, is how it comes across to me hearing that stat.
For sure. So we are going to take a ride down to Miami and talk a little Miami targets. You mentioned earlier that there was a little bit of fake Jaylen Waddle news happening about him being banged up. Will Fuller is already banged up a little bit though, and Devontae Parker is on the pup as well. So going back to Waddle, I mean, it looks like there is a fantastic opportunity for him. Do you think he's the main beneficiary of getting that playing time with Tua as a rookie? Or do you think maybe we could see somebody else emerge in that passing game?
I've been higher on Waddle than most. I think he's going like mid 40s in a lot of these underdog drafts. And right now he's my wide receiver 31. I got him ahead of AB, the 49ers guys, even Curtis Samuel, speaking of the devil. So I just think that looking at this offense, Fuller is coming into the fold and okay, 1 year, $10 million deal. I don't know. Number 6 overall pick seems to kind of scream to me that this is going to be the guy. Then he is starting. Like it's going to be Fuller, Waddle, and Devontae Parker. And this is where I don't understand how anyone can draft Mike Gesicki with confidence unless you're saying all these guys are going to be hurt and not playing, because that's what it took last year for Mike Gesicki to ball out. And I think he's a good enough talent and everything, but he is a slot receiver. And they just drafted his replacement as 6th overall. And they added Will Fuller for good measure. And they drafted Hunter Long, an actual tight end, in the 3rd round. So Gesicki, I know the spark score is awesome. Like he's done good things with his targets, but to base it on, a 5-6 game sample size from last year, we see guys have great end of season stretches all the time. They're usually due to a bunch of injuries. And if you see the receivers that Tua was throwing to in the second half of last year, Mac Hollins, Perkins, all these freaking random guys, like it really stands out. So Waddle has been the guy that I think, Chase was always kind of that wide receiver 2 spot. The market has really come around Davante, I feel like, over the past month or so. Waddle, still not there. I think people are a little concerned about the ankle, and maybe we should be a little bit more. So maybe I'm a tad overzealous, but just as I think his upside, if he's healthy in an offense without an established number 1 with Tua under center, is going a little bit under the radar. So Waddle is someone that I'm not, even if I back off him a little bit, I'll still be higher on than most, because again, I think just if we're down for Tua taking a little step forward this year, which I think he should with all that speed on the field, natural 2nd year progression coming off the hip, Waddle would seemingly be the biggest beneficiary.
Yeah, I don't think that's overzealous at all. I actually have him at 32 myself, so just 1 spot behind
Great
you.
minds.
So I think that's really well in line, because I think he's going to have maybe the most versatile role on the offense, where he's going to be, he's not just going to be a deep threat guy. A lot of people compare him to Tyreek Hill, and I was saying during the draft process that I can kind of see those comparisons for the fact that he doesn't just go deep and track balls. Like he can run slants and he can take them deep. And I think he's going to be a really good wide receiver. I didn't necessarily see him going that high in the draft, but I think that's very telling. And there's that narrative about them missing out on Jamar Chase, so settling for Jaylen Waddle. But I mean, Jaylen Waddle has rapport with Tua Tagovailoa, who they want to get the most out of, right? And that was just the most telling piece for me. So as much as I can't quit Mike Gesicki, love the guy, I won't quit him. But I'm
you might want to go listen. Yeah, Ian's tight end podcast on PFF was a really good one where Ian went through a bunch of tight ends who ain't tight ends, because they're playing so much out in the slot and stuff. And Mike Gesicki was definitely the star of that show, I would say.
Yeah, for sure.
Yes, sir.
So, while I can't quit him, I am quitting him as like a top 10 tight end because I think this offense is going to still stay a little bit low volume in the passing department, but I think some of that low volume is just going to go towards Waddle and then downfield to Will Fuller and Davante Parker when he gets healthy. But should be a good year. Ty, what you got any final thoughts on that Miami Dolphins offense? I know you love you some Myles Gaskin.
Oh, yeah, I think he is supremely undervalued, even absent a goal line or early down role. I think his work in the passing game is what we should, no one wants to talk about Gaskin's work in the passing game, how it might affect some of these weapons. And with the injuries that we're seeing here, I don't think it's crazy to imagine at least a 12% market share, which is really nice. I think he catches 40 to 50 balls next year, and that's a prerequisite for being a top 12 running back, So I really like Myles Gaskin because I do think he has that upside. Even with Malcolm Brown vulturing a lot of touchdowns and getting a lot of early down work, I still like him. And I like Salvin Ahmed for the same reasons that I just said. I like because he's basically free right now. So I like that running back room. I think they are going to run the ball a lot, rely on that defense. Keep the turnovers limited from Tua. So I like everything you guys were saying about the passing game too. I just think some of these injuries will move Myles Gaskin up, and I'm just not seeing that being said anymore.
No, I dig it. So the last one on the old Darnell docket here, Ian is the.
Have you seen the high school tape from Darnell Dockett when he is?
I have not.
Murdering guys. Oh my god, dude.
I'm going to have to.
It's like some random high school news report, and they're just like, "Oh, they're interviewing Darnell Dockett."
You've actually tweeted it out before.
I've sent this out. It is when you think of just the sad events of this future NFL player playing these lifelong teachers that will never sniff the field in college. This is what you're thinking of. I don't want to spoil it for you, but
okay, I'm making a note of that right quick. Darnell Dockett, high school, murdering people. I love it.
I should bring it up. If you just Google that, you should be fine.
Absolutely. So, this last one here is definitely.
People.
yeah, that one could take me down some rabbit holes too. So maybe I'll reword that a bit. But
I think it segues perfectly.
I guess so. Speaking of murdering people here, we're gonna go to Houston and we're gonna talk about that little Anthony Miller trade. We talked some Deshaun Watson earlier. I think what we want to take from the Anthony Miller trade is not so much what Anthony Miller is going to do, and totally chime in if you feel like Anthony Miller is going to be relevant, Ian. But I think we want to see if it does anything for the Chicago Bears. Darnell Mooney gets all that hype. We love him and hope he can get some catchable targets this season. Just hoping to God that Justin Fields is on the field week 1 with that deep accuracy and what he can provide in the RPO game. So this was kind of we put Anthony Miller on here just so we could pretty much talk about the Bears offense a little bit, I guess, Ian. So how do you think that unfolds? And do you think anybody's benefited from Anthony Miller getting his ass out of there?
No, I got to talk some Tony Miller. I like Anthony Miller because he comes in explosive at Memphis. Great film. 2nd round pick. 7 touchdowns with a freaking torn shoulder as a rookie.
Okay.
Only 54 targets. Sorry for scoring too many touchdowns and over progressing what the models say. 2nd year comes out. Week 1, Tariq Cohen's their starting slot receiver because Matt Nagy's going to Matt Nagy. Whatever. By the end of the year, Taylor Gabriel gets hurt. Anthony Miller steps in as number 2. Has some legit splash weeks. We had one of those, 5-6 week samples that kind of made sense, and we had top 24 wide receiver production. What happens in 2020? Nothing. Darnell Mooney overtakes him for the job, and he just can't do it. It all made sense to me, though. I think it was that Rams game where they just got, massacred on Thursday night or something. And they said that Anthony Miller won the award, player voted for most likely to be late to practice. And I was like, oh,
yep. That must be
That's
it.
why, even though he flashes from time to time, this guy cannot seem to get a featured target share to save his life. So, hey, going to Houston, he joins the other 8 wide receivers that could feasibly get targets behind Brandon Cooks. Without Randall Cobb, it's easier. I know I'm rooting for Tony Miller, but no, I'm not touching him. With with the Bears, again, I don't think it affects Mooney anyway, because Miller was someone that was been a cut candidate all kind of, all offseason. I think the Bears were just happy to get anything for him, to be honest. So it doesn't really affect Mooney. If anything, it's like, okay, who's going to be a slot now? Is it going to be fifth or sixth rounder Daz Newsome? Because, usually we don't see day 3 guys starting the season or getting jobs early, but Mooney did it last year in this offense. And hell, I don't know who else is going to be. Riley Ridley, Kadero Hodge. I guess we got a few. Kadero Hodge might be on the Browns still. There's a Javon Wims.
Yeah, I think he went back there.
There you go. There you go.
He was there for the blocking and all that. Yeah.
Excuse me for messing up these 5th and 6th wide receivers.
No, and excuse me for hating on Anthony Miller too. Like, we don't hate players here at TNF. We just hate EPs,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I think his extra position has reflected his flashes.
What it might end up being, though, and I appreciate you bringing up the tight end podcast, because Jimmy Graham was another guy that popped as just more of a slot and wide receiver than otherwise. So Cole Kmet was already playing a near every down role last year, and Jimmy Graham joins Crowder as the guys were like, okay, you can get rid of them whenever. What are you waiting for? Oh, wait, you're just not getting rid of them. I guess you're not going to release them. Crowder, they ended up, coming to a restructure agreement. But Graham, I feel like if they would have gotten rid of him, he would have been gone by now. So I'm not saying you should be targeting Graham. I'm just trying to picture, the most constant Bears offense. Mooney's always been there. Without Miller, maybe we see 2 tight end than normal. I think the big news from Chicago, though, is that Tariq Cohen is just not really close to being healthy yet. And David Montgomery last year, only receiving among running backs. He had the 5th most PPR points. Like, that was really the big burst behind his, the second half schedule helped, but it helped Jonathan Taylor too. Yep. The big thing for Montgomery was getting all the extra receiving work. So we'll see how it plays out.
What about Damian?
That's
like,
the thing.
Do you think they would put him in that role?
Maybe, because, you brought up earlier, like, we'll talk about Auden Tate. I would never tell someone like, hey, draft Auden Tate. Like, you need to get this guy. Totally. I love Auden Tate, but he's not a good fantasy player, and I can separate that. My Twitter bio, I'm the president of the Cordero Patterson fan club. When Tariq Cohen got hurt last year, people were like, oh, Ian, here we go. It's Cordero's time. And I was like, no, it's not. Like, I really appreciate him. I love what he does, but he is not about to, like, take anything away from Montgomery. Damian Williams could, and people want to just say he's nothing. I don't know. When your last game was going for over 100 with 2 tutties in the fucking Super Bowl, that's a little something. I mean, that's not your ideal number 3 running back on the roster. I wish it was Marlon Mack coming off an Achilles, not a guy who opted out of last year for, I believe, his mother or something was high risk or something. That's the only reason he didn't play football last year. Like, we gave Clyde Edwards-Helaire a huge bump up after we knew Damian was out, but for some reason he just doesn't matter now in Chicago. So Montgomery, I get that we should be more high in him, and I think as we call it the RB dead zone where Montgomery has been. I've said that several times this pod, sorry, but that RB kind of RB 16 to like RB 23, 24 range or whatever. But as these, drafts start to correct themselves more and we see people taking the better wide receivers where they should be going, that's when guys like David Montgomery, Chase Edmonds, Myles Gaskin, Mike Davis, all of a sudden when they're going in round 5 and 6 instead of round 3 and 4, like, that's a fine spot to take them. So, yeah, I think, we'll need to keep an eye on Tariq Cohen, but I'm interested to see how this Bears offense looks. I hope they're good. I'm an Ohio State, lifer. I love my Bucs. I love Justin Fields. I am just worried, though, that, we're looking at a franchise that, let's face it, hasn't ever had a good QB, with all due respect to Jim McMahon, a little bit of Jay Cutler. Like, it's a same thing with Washington. Like, do we really think that every quarterback to play in Chicago and Washington for the last 30 years has sucked? Or is maybe there's something a little bit to do with, like, the team that's actually bringing these guys in? So please don't screw up my guy. Please don't screw up Justin Fields. I want him to be great. I'm just not exactly lining up to buy. Like, Allen Robinson is more of a wide receiver too for me. The Bears offense isn't one that I'm signing up to get exposure to in fantasy land.
Totally. And it sucks because I think what we want to see is ourselves be wrong on that. You know what I mean? And have them smash, because it'd be fantastic. Like, David Montgomery is actually the one who I am buying a little bit more into this season, just for that factor. And for the fact that Justin Fields getting in there is going to be great for David Montgomery, I think. So it's going to be an interesting year in Chicago, but the moral of the story for me is just that we want to see Justin Fields do what he does to help out all of these weapons in that offense. Would you agree, Ty?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, how long do we have to wait for Justin Fields? I hope it's not too long. We know Mike Glennon didn't have to wait. He didn't last too long with Mitch Trubisky. I think Fields is a much better prospect than Mitch Trubisky was, of course. And I think with these quarterbacks like Lance and Fields, they add so many elements to the offense, that RPO action, but also that vertical element to your passing game, that I don't see why you wouldn't start them. And I think a lot of things that, like the one thing I think is missing from the Bears conversation this year is they're going to be the worst team they've been in a few years next year. They are not going to be a really good football team. I would bet they're a worse football team than the Minnesota Vikings next year, which would make them easily the third worst team in their division. Like they're not going to be worse than the Lions. I'm not saying that. But I do think they're going to have to throw the ball a little more. So it might be a good idea to have a pretty good quarterback in there, as opposed to Andy Dalton, who is the worst signing I've seen in the last half decade when it comes to a position that important. I just can't believe when you could have got him the year before that you wait a year and overpay for a guy who just had an unbelievably bad season under Kellen fucking Moore. So I don't know what the Bears were thinking. I think that entire regime is on the hot seat. GM, coach, everyone else has fallen on their sword at this point. So I got lots of thoughts on the Bears, but a lot of excitement for the Justin Fields era Bears.
Totally, man. Not to like, they already have the same guy on the roster in Nick Foles. You know what I mean? Maybe, a little less safe with the ball, but he can do what Andy Dalton's going to do, and you're paying him a buttload too. So, yeah, come on, Bears, but Bears going to bear. So, Ian, that's all we got for you tonight. Really want to say thank you for coming on. You spit some fire this evening. As usual, didn't expect anything less from someone of your ilk, my man. So just thanks for coming on. I'd really like to open up the floor and let you talk about some of the stuff that you're working on as we move through training camps and into the season. Dude, let's hear it.
Yeah, just, check out PFF Fantasy Football Podcast. I got new episodes coming out every day, starting to turn it up with some more, specific, just, hey, leagues are finally happening. People are drafting. I've been trying to keep the content up since February, so it's been a long off season for me, but for those just getting back in the swing of things, I had Rich Rebar from Sharp Football Analysis on the other day. We broke down the entire QB landscape. I think it'll be a very helpful podcast for pretty much anyone out there. So check that out if you like. PFF.com. iHeart on Twitter, just having a good time. We're talking ball at the end of the day, so it's good to be informed about it, good to pay attention as much as possible, and just a great day to be great. Appreciate you guys having me on. Always a good time to talk ball.
Absolutely. Ty, you got any parting shots for the people?
No, that was so well said. I got nothing to add. Just thanks so much for everybody who joined us, and if you have any input, make sure you hit us up on Twitter. Thanks for getting in the comments and everything, everybody. I really appreciate it, and appreciate Ian. I really meant that he is not only super amazingly good at this, but also one of the hardest workers in the industry. Can also that can get lost sometimes in the shuffle. And he's a top-notch dog dad through all that too. So you give you a lot of kudos for that too. So
yes, shout out to PFF Lily.
Have you.
Bro, just wait, man. Once I get a legit house and stuff, I want to have 10, 12 dogs one day. It's gonna get it's gonna be getting weird in the 2030s on my Twitter. We'll see. I'd be selling
so you just got two right now.
I got two. I got two with me. My mom has two. So I feel officially 4, but I'm thinking eventually in the house 10 plus. We'll see what happens. I want to find out the answer to how many dogs is too many dogs, because I haven't found it yet. So we'll see.
No, ask Dr. Doolittle. There's no wrong answer.
Going full crazy cat lady on it. I love that. And I have one dog, but I can tell you he is happiness embodied. So I can totally see that, Ian. So before we ride out, just want to say shout out to Fantasy Points.
There we go.
I think Trav is cutting out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is remove my good buddy Trav, and he's going to leave us a little bit early, and we kept Ian a little bit late. So my apologies, Ian, but just can't thank everybody enough. And make sure you're joining us on Twitter at TruenorthFFB, at TNFF Pod. And until next time. Oh my God, I blew it, Ian. Sorry.
All good.